My mom demanded I give my new house to my brother, claiming he was more deserving. She said it like it was obvious, like the keys in my hand had always been meant for him. We were standing in my living room, sunlight cutting across freshly painted walls I had paid for, worked for, sacrificed for. My brother leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, already smirking like the decision had been made. "You don't need all this space," she added, her voice calm but final. "He has a family. He deserves it more." Deserves. The word echoed louder than anything else in the room. I looked at the marble countertop I had chosen, the boxes I hadn't even unpacked yet, the silence I had earned after years of noise and struggle. My chest tightened, not with anger but with clarity. Then my brother spoke, low and confident. "If you don't do this, don't expect anything when it's time for the will." That's when I realized they thought I still needed them. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the one who didn't argue, didn't demand, didn't make scenes, while my brother was celebrated for the smallest achievements. I learned early that silence was safer than competing for attention. I was never going to get. He was the golden son. I was the backup plan. Growing up, I watched my parents rearrange their priorities around him. His mistakes excused, his failures softened, his needs always urgent. Mine were optional. When I worked 2 jobs to get through college, they called it independence. When he dropped out twice, they called it finding himself. I didn't complain. I adjusted. Over time, I stopped expecting fairness and started building distance instead. I saved quietly, planned carefully, and made decisions without asking for approval I knew wouldn't come. This house wasn't just a purchase. It was proof that I didn't need their version of support to survive. Still, a part of me wondered if things had changed, if success would finally make them see me differently. Standing there, watching my mother negotiate my life like it belonged to someone else, I understood something with unsettling clarity. They hadn't changed. They just assumed I never would. My mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked through the house like she was inspecting it for him, running, her fingers along the kitchen counter, opening cabinets, pausing at the window like she was already imagining his life here. "Not mine, never mine. This would be perfect for them," she said softly, almost to herself. My brother followed behind her, quiet but present, like a shadow that had already claimed its place. Every now and then he'd glance at me, not directly, just enough to check if I was going to resist. When I didn't speak, his confidence grew. "You can always get something smaller," he added casually, picking up my keys from the table and spinning them once before setting them back down, not asking, testing. I noticed the way my mother didn't correct him. Instead, she sighed lightly, like I was making things difficult simply by standing there. "You've always been practical," she said, her tone almost comforting. "You understand sacrifice." Sacrifice. It wasn't a request. It was a reminder of my role. I felt it then, not anger, not yet, but a quiet shift. The kind that happens when you finally see a pattern, clearly enough that it can't be ignored anymore. They weren't asking. They were expecting. I let the silence stretch just long enough for them to mistake it for agreement. My brother had moved on to the backyard, already talking about where he'd put a grill. My mother stood near the hallway, nodding along, her expression settled, like the matter was quietly resolved. That's when I understood the real problem. It wasn't just that they favored him. It was that they genuinely believed I would fold. I walked over to the dining table, where a slim folder rested beneath a stack of unopened mail. I had brought it with me that morning, out of habit, more than intention. Important documents, things I kept organized, things I never thought I'd need to use like this. My fingers brushed the edge of the folder, and for a brief moment, I hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of recognition. This was the line. Once crossed, there would be no pretending anymore, no quiet acceptance, no returning to the role they had written for me. Behind me, my brother laughed, easy, unearned, already at home in a place that wasn't his. And just like that, the hesitation disappeared. I picked up the folder, turned back toward them, and finally spoke. "No," I said, calm and steady. "This house isn't yours." Then I placed the paperwork on the table. "And neither is the future you think you control." I didn't arrive at that moment unprepared. I never do. Years of being overlooked had taught me something useful. When no one is paying attention to you, you have time to pay attention to everything else. I work in finance now, contracts and asset protection specifically. I understand how ownership works, how control is documented, and more importantly, how assumptions can be quietly dismantled with the right paper. When I bought the house, I structured everything deliberately. The title wasn't just in my name. It was shielded through a legal framework that made transfer nearly impossible. Without my explicit, recorded consent, no emotional pressure, no family expectation could override that. Not even a will could touch it. And then there was my father's will. Months ago, during a routine conversation, he had mentioned updating it. My brother had been present, nodding along, barely listening. I had listened. I had asked questions, calm ones, specific ones, enough to understand what was really happening behind the surface. After that, I made a few quiet calls, verified a few details through legal channels I had access to, and requested copies where I was entitled to see them. I didn't confront anyone then. I waited, because the strongest position isn't loud, it's informed. And now, standing in that room, I knew something they didn't. I slid the folder across the table, the sound soft but deliberate, enough to pull both of their attention back to me. My mother frowned slightly, as if I'd interrupted something trivial. My brother stepped in from the backyard, curiosity replacing his earlier confidence. "Just look," I said. He opened it first. At the top was the property deed, my name, reinforced by the legal structure I had put in place, unmovable, untouchable. His eyes skimmed it quickly, dismissively at first, until he realized there was nothing there he could challenge. Then he turned the page. This time he slowed down. My mother moved closer, reading over his shoulder. I watched the shift happen, not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet collapse of certainty. The updated will was clear, precise, and recently filed. The majority of my father's estate wasn't going to him. It hadn't been for a while. Conditions, clauses, and decisions he had ignored. Choices that had slowly, legally redirected everything elsewhere. To me, my brother muttered, confused. I shook my head slightly. "No," I said, calm as ever. "Not to you." The room went still. No raised voices. No arguments. Just the weight of a truth they never bothered to check, settling in all at once. My brother was the first to step back, like the paper itself had burned him. The confidence he walked in with didn't shatter. It thinned, stretched into something uncertain. For the first time, he looked at me directly, not past me. This doesn't make sense," he said quietly. But it did. He just hadn't been paying attention. My mother didn't speak right away. Her eyes moved between the documents and my face, searching for something, hesitation, maybe, or the version of me that used to give in. When she didn't find it, her posture changed, subtle but unmistakable. "You knew about this?" she asked. "I made sure I understood it," I replied. That was the difference. No one raised their voice. There was no dramatic fallout, no slammed doors, just a quiet unraveling of assumptions they had built over years. About me, about him, about how things would always go. For them, it was a loss of control. For me, it was something else entirely, not revenge in the way people expect. No anger, no destruction, just clarity. And once you see things clearly, you can't go back to pretending they were ever fair. After they left, the house felt different. Not quieter. It had always been quiet, but settled in a way it hadn't before. Like something invisible had finally been acknowledged and removed. I walked through each room slowly, not to admire it, but to feel it as mine again. Every choice, every sacrifice, every late night that led here, undisturbed. They didn't call that night. Or the next. Part of me expected guilt to creep in, the old reflex to fix things, to soften what had happened. But it didn't come. What replaced it was something steadier. Relief, maybe, or just the absence of pressure I had carried for too long without noticing. I don't know what happens next for them. Maybe they adjust. Maybe they don't. But I do know what happens next for me. I keep going, the way I always have. Quietly, deliberately, without waiting for permission or approval. The difference now is that I'm no longer building my life around what they expect to take from it. Some people call that revenge. I call it balance. Because in the end, I didn't take anything from them. I just stopped giving them what was never theirs to begin with.